Comedy legend Louis Black is bringing Goodbye Yeller Brick Road, the final tour, to Steelhouse on Sunday, February 25th. Tickets go on sale Friday, November 17th at 10 a.m. Get yours at steelhouseomaha.com.
You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night.
Welcome to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast, where we talk about the continual pursuit of the section hiker.
And I'll spread the word, and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come. And we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
Welcome back to Jester Section Hiker, the premier podcast with a spotlight on section hikers. I'm your host, Julie Jester Gayhart, and this is the podcast where you will hear stories about everyday people who, in addition to their everyday lives, make the commitment to hike long-distance trails where every section is a new beginning. On today's podcast, you are going to hear from Mark, No Nail, and Casey, Mo Miles More. Mark and Casey spent 10 years completing the Appalachian Trail in section hikes. They started off their section hike as a 50th year tribute to Mark. Mark wanted to hike 100 miles on the Appalachian Trail, so they did. Initially, Mark and Casey did not set out to hike the entire AT, but it just happened. Not only was their 10-year section hike a test of their endurance, but their relationship as well. Mark has also written a book titled Thirdway, which revolves around life at the fictional Thirdway Lodge and the hikers that pass through the lodge. I look forward to hearing about their 10-year section hike and their book Thirdway. Welcome with me to the podcast, Mark and Casey Moore.
Hi, Jester. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, Jester, it's great to talk with you again.
Good to see you guys again. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell the listeners, they have no idea what we've been through trying to get this episode recorded. This is actually our second time recording a full episode. Something happened to the first episode with me and my recording, and it was just this miscellaneous person that was asking Mark and Casey questions, and somehow my voice didn't end up being there. And graciously, Mark and Casey said yes, they would come and record again, because I think their story of hiking 10 years on the AT is phenomenal. So let's go ahead and get this started. And Casey, we're going to start with you. Mark wanted to do this 50th year birthday hike, and you guys decided, oh yeah, let's go out on the Appalachian Trail for 100 miles. Talk to us, Casey, about how you thought this hike was going to go down, and what were your initial thoughts about all this?
Well, years ago, a friend of mine, I lived in Texas, and she hiked the AT. She was a thru hiker. And my vision of what hiking the AT was you climbed a mountain in Georgia, and then you pretty much just walked on ridges until you got off in Maine. And I didn't realize that it was this up and down, up and down, up and down journey. So,
okay, Casey, I'm really trying not to laugh. I'm not.
I was young and I just didn't think about it. So then we moved to Virginia in 2003, and we started hiking in the Shenandoah area. And that's where I first encountered the AT, and I got a better sense of what was really going on. And so when Mark said he wanted to hike 100 miles, I love hiking. It was the camping I wasn't so sure about, but okay, it's a few nights and we got this cute gear and we went on a test night. I was down for it, but it ended up being more than we bargained for. We didn't have the right cute gear. We had cotton socks, for example. I don't know if Mark wants to chime in, but after several days, the remnants of a hurricane hit us. And there was so much rain and our so many blisters. And it was more than we bargained for. And I was kind of done. But since we didn't do the full 100, we just did 75 miles, we couldn't give up. So we needed to come back the next year.
Okay, Casey, so you've set the stage for us that, here's Mark. Hey, let's go out and hike 100 miles. Casey thinks you're going to walk, climb a little mountain in Georgia and walk along a beautiful ridge all the way to Maine. And Casey, you did this to yourselves and you had cute gear with cotton socks. So, so over the course of the next 10 years, we're going to let this cute trip unfold where you ended up in the pouring down rain and all this wonderful stuff. But I always loved it. Before we go any further, I always love to hear how people get their trail names. So Casey, we'll go back to you and be careful what you say, because I'm always going, somewhere in the podcast, I'm going to figure out how to make fun of something. So talk to us about how you derived your trail name, Mo Miles.
Well, starting off, I call myself Fresca. It's my favorite drink, and it means fresh in Spanish. But as the years went on, I developed a pronounced predilection for getting lost or thinking I was lost, and or doubling back, not going straight when the trail went to the left, what have you. And so I ended up hiking way, way more miles than I needed to. There was one time I hiked for an hour and ended up back at the trailhead where I had started because I missed a turn and just doubled back accidentally. So, and now I do sound silly, but
hey, Mark, I promise we're going to get to you, but it's kind of turned into the Casey show here a little bit. So,
that's good.
Yeah, keep going.
well, that's it. Just eventually, I just had to own it. That I walk more miles, and our last name's Moore, and so it just became Mo Miles. And I have a license plate. It's easy to get in Virginia that says Mo Miles. It turns out people think I'm saying like mills, like millions, and like it's a money thing, and it's a hiking thing.
Oh, like Mo Money, like you're like a rapper. So okay,
yeah,
so
Mo Milz, yeah.
I don't know. We may have just renamed you. All right. Mark, Casey's kind of set a little bit of a stage here. So welcome to the podcast, Mark.
Yeah, thank you.
And tell us a little bit about how you got your trail name.
Yeah, Casey left a lot of stuff there. That's fantastic. So as she's talking, I'm thinking that part of it with the trail name, part of my trail name, which is No Nail, comes about in that first hike. So that first hike out, I was like, what do you want? Do you want something big? Do you want, for your 50th birthday, what do you want? And, Casey's like, what is someone who's turning 50 going to get? Some more midlife crisis thing? Like, do you want a Mustang? Are you going to have an affair? What's going to happen here in midlife? And,
Casey's looking at me in the screen here like, what?
Well, she said that. It was a long time ago now, but and so we're thinking of like something signature, something big. And we'd done some day hikes and such, and so this idea was launched or hatched with us in 100 miles. So we did that test hike that Casey talked about. So it was an overnight hike. So we actually had gear, and we learned a little bit, probably not enough. And part of that test hike, we actually went up and down the Priest in Virginia, which is a pretty steep hill, definitely for Virginia. And so it tested us, and we learned things. It was like, okay, we're good. So we planned this hike, and one of the, I don't know if it's, I guess, challenges or just a nature of the section hiker is that you plan a trip for a certain number of miles in a certain number of days. And often, the plans go awry if you're limiting yourself to that particular set of days and time. So in that first hike, we planned it and had a certain time. Well, then this weather started coming through, and there's a hurricane that came through, and the remnants of it came through in Virginia. And we're getting ready to start our hike, and we're like, well, this is the time we have. So we went out there, And the first day or two, it was okay. And then the rain just started coming down. And I looked later, and we actually had a 5 inches of rain within a 24-hour period. So we had not the right gear. We had cotton socks, had way too much weight. And just learning and blisters. So we needed to make so many miles, and our feet were just soggy. And later I found I had a blister underneath one of my big toenails. So the entirety of the underneath side of one of the toenails was a blister, which many hikers will identify with. And so as a result, several months later, I'd lost several nails out of that hike. So that's where that's kind of where the no nail came from.
Okay. So we are literally 10 minutes and 16 seconds into this, and I can hardly stop laughing. So I think a lot. So I think what we've narrowed this down to is Casey likes to hike a lot of miles on ridges. Yes. And Mark likes to wear cotton socks, and and we're all laughing and having a good time. But I guarantee you, every single listener out there is like right now in their mind resonating. Oh my God, I've been there, done that. I've had that disaster. I've been in the rain like that. And okay, I think we've determined that first 100 miles, which ended up being about 70 miles. Okay. We're going to call that disaster trip number 1. But the thing is, it wasn't a disaster because, everybody knows you've completed the trail, but you learned from that. Mm-hmm. And which is going to lead to my next question for you, Mark. Mm-hmm. And I think I had a similar experience after one of my first section hikes. It really didn't sit well with me because all I kept thinking about was what I could do better and what I needed to change, and getting back out there and seeing if what I thought I perfected for the second one was going to work on my second hike. So, okay, the first year, we're going to put all that behind us. Here we are. It didn't sit well with you. So, Mark, talk to us a little bit about what you guys decided to do, your changes, and going forward.
Well, after we finished that hike, you're right. It didn't sit well with us. Some of it's a pride thing. We're both very goal oriented, and also I had this nagging thing, like, my feet were hurting, and couldn't we have gone that extra 25 miles? Couldn't we have done it? What could we have done differently? Did we give up too early? And again, we're goal oriented, and we still had that 100-mile thing. So the next year we said, let's try this again. And so our strategy was to choose what we felt like was a fairly easy area, which ended up being the Shenandoah Mountains in Virginia along the Skyline Drive. And so we chose that area. We chose almost exactly 100 miles to not overtax ourselves, but to still get the 100. It ended up being 103 miles. And we stripped down with weight as much as we felt like we could. I also lost weight going into it. To try to strip down with weight. We didn't take a camp stove, which was the first and last time we ever did that, because we found out that after 3 or 4 or 5 days, Cliff Bars and dried nuts just weren't cutting it. And so we did this. And so
I'm gonna have to leave my mic because
so what happened in that hike was at the end of the second night, it started raining, and it was this driving rain where we have a tent cover and then the tent, and it was still misting through that. So we were like, oh no, here we go again. And I remember the next day, so we were there, and I'm looking at my guides and everything. It's like, oh, there is a road crossing in like 5 miles. If we need to get off the trail, we can do this. And Casey and I talked a little bit about it. And we started hiking. It was raining, and actually, this, looking back, this might have been a turning point. This might have been the moment that meant that we ended up doing the entire trail, because Casey said, "You know what? Like, no, we're not getting off the trail. We're going to complete this 100 miles, so we never have to do this damn thing again." She's like, if it's going to kill us, because if we stop at 30 or 40 or 50 or 60, guess what? Later in the year or the next year, it's going to nag at us and we're going to force ourselves to go out there, whether it's a good thing or not. So we ended up doing it. We did it in 5 days, and we did it. And so there's a sense of accomplishment. And then what we found is over the years, when we'd leave, we'd be like, well, are we going to do this again or we're not? We didn't set out to hike the entire Appalachian Trail. Are we going to do this or not? And what we found is that we kind of evolved from being at the end of one of these hikes going, phew, that was good. And then maybe the next year start to think about it. Later on, it's like when we finished a hike, we said, okay, where's the next hike? So that was part of the evolution of hiking.
And I feel like you guys have painted this picture. So here I am hiking on the trail and I come up to you guys and you guys are like throwing stuff out of your tent and it's just like this chaotic mess, but that's not really what it was. So you're like that couple on the trail that you're determined you're going to do maybe. And I'm like, oh, let's not camp near this. We don't know what's going on here, but so, and you guys are letting me have a lot of fun. And all right, so we've got this picture. It's Mark's 50th year. We're going to hike 100 miles. And okay, that didn't sit so well. So you guys go out. Here you are in the Shenandoahs. And Casey makes this profound statement and says, we are finishing this. We are doing this. Okay, we should have brought our stove, but oh well, we're going to finish this, right? And I know when we originally talked a few months back, Casey, you said a couple statements to me that I'm going to relay back to you.
Okay.
And I'd like to, for you to expand on that for us. So originally, all this ridge walking and getting back out here and doing this, it kind of turned in for you that you don't have to, but you wanted to. And it's hard for couples to have that exact same dream. So I think, as Mark previously just stated, that second round was a turning point for you guys where you didn't have to, you wanted to, and maybe you guys didn't have that same dream, but it kind of morphed that way. So Casey, talk to us about those two statements.
Well, it ended up taking a while longer after we finished that second year, and then some other day hikes that we had done. We had completed 250 miles, and Mark, he's into math, and he was like, that's more than 10% of the trail. And we could do this whole thing. And we were in our kitchen, and I said, like, okay, because it sounded like fine. And it sounded like a fun thing to be able to say to people. I didn't think about the implications that this would mean our vacations going forward were all going to revolve around the trail and what it would mean. And so for the next few years, we did hike every summer and throughout the year. And I would always think, like, I love the hiking, but there was this nagging sense that I had to. It was just that sense that I had to. I had said I would, and I wanted to help Mark achieve this goal. And then it was when we were in the Whites, and I just had an epiphany that I really could say no. I could say, I've done enough, even though I didn't finish the whole thing. I could take it. I could do as much or as little as I wanted. And it maybe sounds simple to someone listening, but sort of relationally, it was a really important step to be able to go, I can support you in your dream, but I don't have to go. And somehow in doing that, it just unlocked for me any reluctance I had. So I did take it step by step, but with a full heart, without any sense of reservation or reluctance.
I love that, because one of the things that I love, whether it's the Appalachian Trail or wherever I'm hiking, that sometimes when you say stuff out loud and you kind of give it to the trail, it's like, wow. I mean, my mind is really open to what could be happening now. And it kind of sounds like, that's what happened. Even though you were in the White Mountains, you had this sense of, okay, I've told the truth about what I'm really thinking. And now it's just like you're open, and it's like it has set you free. And at that point, did you decide, yes, I'm going to finish this hike?
At that point, I didn't. I decided I could do whatever I wanted. And then one day at a time, I kept wanting to hike, And I felt like it was going to be okay with Mark either way. Part of it was I ran into these guys who were, they were kind of teasing me because I was hiking the trail with my husband, but we were doing a flip-flop. So we had started at either ends of the trail. So we weren't actually traveling together that day. And they were like, oh yeah, you're hiking together. And I thought, well, where's your wife? She's sitting at home. Like we
Right.
are hiking together, even if we aren't in the same space all the time. And just getting to think about like, something about that triggered something in my mind about letting go of expectations and ideas of how things should be, and just do what feels true to you, as you said. I think the trail does help. For me, the trail was a crucible for our relationship. It was going to make us stronger, or it was going to tear us apart a little bit. Being around someone for a prolonged period where you're physically uncomfortable can test a relationship, but it definitely made ours stronger.
And even though it sounds like to me, as you guys grew in your trail lives, because you do have a trail life when you're on the trail, and even though you're hiking, together, you're independent on the trail, and you become more independent in your thinking, even though you're I totally understand that. And, and hiking with someone else does not mean butterflies and beautiful flowers and holding hands down the trail, especially when you're hiking. I know we're like, I mean, you see those couples out on the trail and they're holding hands and stuff. Well, that's not reality 2,100 miles up the trail. That might be reality when you first start dating somebody, but when you commit to hiking a long distance trail, like you said, it will test your marriage and various things. So I do appreciate you being open and honest with that. And I think that will resonate with a lot of people, whether they're hiking with their partner or not, is that sometimes the trail will pull the truth out of you. And if you start saying things out loud, your hike actually gets a little bit better. So Mark, you've been kind of silent there. So I always like to hear, going off of what Casey said, what is your perspective as a male and hiking as a couple, and, speaking your truth out loud? And I hate that, speaking your truth. It sounds so cliche, but all of us, I think, that are hiking long distance, it happens at some point or the other, that you kind of have to say deep down inside what you're really thinking. And when you do that, your hike gets better. So what did you realize, Mark? Or did you not? You just let Casey do her thing and you continued hiking?
Well, as Casey's talking about the kind of evolution of relationship, and I remember her and I talking, I don't know, this is like our third or so year in, and just for perspective of some of the logistics, the first number of years we went off for about a week or 5 or 6 day section hike, but during the year we'd often do different day hikes. And later, after about 3 years or 4 years, we started doing like 10-day or 12 or 13 days. So the 1 week block turned into 2 week blocks. But I remember talking to her after a few years when we've been on several of these like week long 5, 6, 7 day section hikes. And it seemed like each hike was a microcosm of a relationship. In some ways, our relationship. Like you go out there and like Jester, you said it's like dating. You get out there and like, oh, we're going to do this hike. We're out here for 6 days. This is great. We got our pack. We're dry. We're well fed right now. We have clean water in our pack. We've got all this great stuff, and our gear is clean and dry, and we don't smell yet, and or we smell like the town instead of like the trail. And there's a lot of positivity, and it is like a dating thing. And then you get into it, and after the first day or two, things start to wear. Maybe the weather isn't great, or you're hungry, or you're hurt. And we found that a day or two in, sometimes that was a difficult period. We'd snipe at each other a little bit, and so we found that. But then by day 2 or 3, it's like we're in it together. It's us. Not versus the trail, but us in partnership with the trail, like us as a couple being in partnership with life. We're moving through this together. We're supporting each other. We're giving each other a hand up. We're doing that. So it was, at the end, it's like, oh, we have an accomplishment, but this is just one section. this is not, this is not the whole trail. This is just one thing. Like you go through something as a couple and maybe you have an anniversary and you're like, okay, that, this has been great. And now we keep going, and so that's why I say it's kind of like a microcosm of our relationship in a way, each hike.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that is great. And I wish the listeners could see this because Casey has really leaned into her computer to kind of really I could tell that Casey was like, wow, what is he going to say? So that was phenomenal. That was phenomenal. And that kind of describes where I think the listeners now have a very good picture of how you guys started out. Okay, you weren't happy with that. You refined your gear. You refined as a couple. And I know we talked about you guys did day hikes in between your vacations off and things like that. So let's move toward more of how you guys started to tackle this, like logistically. And one of the things that we talked about, I think, Casey, you said on a very practical everyday level, you guys worked as a couple. I'm quoting Casey there. So very practical everyday level, you guys worked as a couple. And then Mark, you started to say like, yes, we had this down to a science. Yeah. So the last 2 or 3 years, you guys had this down to a science. And you started planning your sections and, Casey alluded to it earlier, hiking in opposite directions, key swapping, really dialing into this so you could see that finish line. So Mark, start talking to us a little bit about logistically how your hike changed and how you guys progressed in that manner.
Sure. So as Casey mentioned earlier, we talked about after the first couple of years and a few day hikes, 200 and some miles, like, oh gosh, that's 10% of the trail. And I like numbers and thinking that way and as 10% of the trail, but it was also like pretty close to 50% of Virginia. We didn't know if we were going to finish the whole trail, but like if we could do half of Virginia, that would be pretty cool. And if we could do all of Virginia, that'd be pretty cool. So part of it was planning, you're looking at sections and thinking, okay, what's a block that we can take out of? But we didn't want that block to be someplace that would interfere if we were taking a trip up to Stanton, Virginia, and we can go do a day hike for 10 miles. So we're trying to plan all this stuff logistically where we could fit things in. We live in Southeastern Virginia. We've got family in New York. So some of our day hikes were going up to see family, and we'd hop off the interstate in New Jersey or New York and Pennsylvania and go do a day hike. Well, we didn't want to do a big section through that area because we wanted to reserve those areas for when we were traveling through and doing day hikes. So there's a lot of logistics like that. And we ended up after, I'm not sure however many years, with a big AT strip map, which a lot of people do. We're kind of coloring in areas that we had. And I've had friends say, well, how do you know? How do you know you did every mile? It's like, oh, I know. Because you have these, you have the guides,
Believe me, when you're section hiking the trail, I've had nightmares thinking that I skipped a section and would like literally plan to go back and do that just because I thought. So people rest assured, we know if we've hiked every white blaze.
We know exactly. And so, part of it's looking into the logistics, the planning. And after I say the last 5 years, a lot of it was down to, of course, you don't want to take too much food or too little food. And since we had literally days planned, we'd have like a small grocery plastic bag with a day's food in it. And then we had those, and then we'd have our foil pouch meals set aside, and some of those we would share. So we kind of got down to kind of knowing how many calories we were going to have roughly, and getting a good idea. And we'd come back from a trip and say, okay, this is what we planned. Did we have any left over or not? And can we learn from that for the next time? The thing I'll say quickly about what Casey was talking about, and you alluded to, like with the key swapping, and this is part of the Mo Miles trail name story as well, is that we would do these things, and we would call them flip-flop hikes ourselves. So we would go and we'd go out to a trailhead, and one of us would start hiking northbound. and the other one would drive in the car north and get to another trailhead, let's say 15 miles north of where the first person started, and that person would start hiking south. And so you get there and swap keys. And actually, we ended up, I think we did that once or twice, but then we said, no, we each need a key in case something happens. Which ended up.
One of you could. I've done this
that.
too. Somebody's at the bed. Somebody's at the bathroom. Somebody went down to the shelter. You walk right past each other, and you're like, "What the heck happened here?"
Yeah.
So we thought that happened one year, that someone was off in the shelter, but it wasn't. So this was a year where, and I remember it was in New York State, where I started hiking north. Casey drove north, and so I'm hiking north, and I keep waiting to run into her. And I go by a shelter, and I'm like, wait, did I miss her there? So what happened was I'm hiking north, but Casey drove 15 miles north, and she started hiking north.
Oh, no.
So luckily, and I think this is maybe an advantage of the section hiker, is that the section she was hiking, we had done like 2 years earlier. So the section hiker
In a different season.
In all fairness, I'm going in a different direction. So I'm not saying.
And it all looked new. It all looked different. There you go.
It all looked different, but the advantage was that since we'd done that section, and so when you're doing section, especially hiking, especially you're paying attention to the trailhead, you're paying attention to the roads, you kind of know a lot of the details of it. And since we'd done that section before, we ended up connecting by telephone, and I was able to say, "Where are you?" And she said, "Oh, I just passed a pond." I was like, "Oh, I know right where you're at. Tell you what, probably in like 2 miles, you're going to come across a road, Route 22 in New York, where the Metro North trail stop is, and that's where you're going to be. Just wait there, and I'm going to go north. I'm going to get the car, and I'll come around to get you." So it ended up being better than if she had started walking north up into the White Mountains or something.
Exactly. So so some of the logistics are not easy. And I always say that majority of section hikers, not only have we hiked the trail, we've driven the trail, and we've been to a lot of the trailheads. So ask us questions, people. We know what we're doing. We may hike the wrong way. And there are a lot of through hikers that I've gotten up from staying, at a campsite, gotten up and gone the wrong way myself too. So it does happen.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on to, okay, you guys got the logistics down. I'm assuming at this point you're not wearing cotton socks anymore. And somewhere along the way, you guys are like, wow, this is going to be really cool. If we finish in 10 years, we can celebrate the year of Mark's 60th. And you do that awesome hike to Katahdin. So, Casey, talk to us a little bit about maybe your final hike, you guys completing on Katahdin. And I'm going to ask you 3 things in one. So, that final hike, completing on Katahdin, and I'll remind you, and, life after the trail.
Okay. So, the final hike was beautiful. There were a bunch of people who were going up. It was a misty day. And Mark said, we should start counting how many people pass us as we go up. I don't know. There were a lot of people who passed us, but everyone was friendly and supportive. And one of the things I love about hikers is their openness. There was no snobbery from the through hikers. They were just excited for us to be finishing as they were to finish themselves. And we got up to the top and, took the pictures of the picture of the two of us over the sign is still my Facebook photo. It may be for the rest of our lives. It was a big deal. And actually Mark didn't have his birthday till the next year because we finished in, the magic of zeros or whatever. Yeah. So the 10 years, but what ended up happening afterwards.
So you guys started, I guess to let everybody know, you started in 2008 and you summited in 2018.
17.
Or 17. Okay, 17.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So it was 10 years within that. So afterwards, we thought we will finish the long trail because, so much of the the long trail coincides with the ATs, and we love Vermont. We've got good friends who live up there. And so we went out to hike on that, and I got injured. And this is the first time where I ever really felt vulnerable on the trail. My knee was just terribly painful, and then we had to hike all the next day in the rain, of course.
Of course.
And so we left the trail early, and that's the first time that ever happened. And then the next year we went back, and Mark had an injury. And so we're still, especially with COVID now and travel and everything, it's all up in the air about where we will go. I was looking at some pictures recently, and to think that I won't be up on those mountains again. Sorry, we're moving back to Texas. So the thought that I might not get up on those mountains again makes me really sad. But I hope we will. We hike all the time around here. There are lots of places right near our house. There's some woods, but there's something about that freedom, that
you can't describe it. There's some, I keep trying to tell people there is 100% something about the Appalachian Trail and the community and those mountains and things that happen. You can't describe it.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to describe on a video, on a podcast, and everybody listening to this that loves hiking. Casey, we're all crying because we've been there. Here we are in the midst of COVID, and we've had an awesome conversation. And, we're reliving our, finest moments out on the trail. And I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. And I think it's amazing. I don't know why you guys are moving to Texas, but that just proves right there that there is something about this mountain range that when it gets in your heart and your gut, it's not going anywhere. It is not going anywhere.
Yeah, we're moving apart because my family's all in Austin. We used to live there, and it took me a while to accept the Appalachian Mountains. When I was younger, we lived in Monterrey, Mexico, which is the Sierra Madre Mountains, which are desert mountains. And so I was like, these Virginia mountains, they're so soft and pretty. They're nothing. But now I love the trees. I love the green tunnel. The constant beauty. It's a different kind of beauty in Texas. There's a lot of beauty there. It's just not the tall tree, gentle mountain, ancient mountain kind.
Well, Casey, I can't think of any other way, to kind of end your journey, with the Appalachian Trail of finishing. You tried to get out on the long trail and stuff happened, but how you talk about the trail, that's not going anywhere. You're not finished with the trail. Not at all. Not at all. So, Mark, I don't know where you and I go from here.
Well, one thing I wanted to say, Jester, with Casey talking about this, and I may get in trouble for this, so we may want to delay this podcast for a year or two. But
nope, whatever you say, Mark, it's coming out. I'm telling you,
it's coming out. So. Yeah, and you mentioned why are we moving and talking about the love for the trail and the Virginia mountains and the mountains on the East Coast and stuff, and as we looked, it was really, and I've got family on the East Coast, but they're spread out. They're not here in Virginia, so no matter where we are, that's a trip to get to family anyway, and we thought eventually we'd go back to the Austin area where we lived for a long time and where we met and. But we kept going back and forth like, gosh, if we go there, there's family, but we don't have the mountains. And if we love the mountains, but if we're there, where there's not all of her family. And so this is the part I may get in trouble with, family versus mountains. It was kind of a tough call. But
I got to tell you, I'm right. And another thing, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, there are listeners out there right now that are listening to this going, yes. I want to be in the mountains. I choose mountains. And my family will tell you that, she'll just go to the Appalachian Trail. They know that I'd rather be on the trail for Christmas. I mean, it's just like, and I can't explain it or describe it. And it just sounds like you guys, like I said with Casey, it's in your heart. It's not going away. It doesn't matter where you live.
And like you said, it's in there, it's part of it. And it is, as you said, Jester, it's hard to describe to people. It's hard to describe when you come off the trail, you go out hiking, and I go back to work, and people are like, what's, they ask about that, and part of it, and that's fine. It's not their world. They don't understand the camping. It's like, oh, I love hiking, and they're thinking like a 2-mile walk in along the beach or something, and that's fine. Everyone's got their different perspective. I had to laugh the first year we'd done a hike. It was that first short hike that we went up and down the Priest and all this, and had a colleague. He goes, well, how fast you go? You probably go like 4 miles an hour? It's like, no, not 4 miles an hour. But this stuff, it does become part of you. And that community is hard to describe. And we've been on so many hikes where people are so supportive. It doesn't matter what you're doing. And I've been out I remember it being, we were in Pennsylvania one year. We're doing like a 10-mile day hike, and came across this through hiker. He's like, oh, how you doing? You're like, where'd you start from? Where you just say, we're just doing a day hike. Cool. And he's so supportive and so happy. I remember being near Kent Pond in Vermont, and we were doing it was like a 4-day section or something, and 4 or 5 day. And it was our last night. It was our last day. And we're going to end up at the Inn at Long Trail near Rutland, Vermont. So we're there, and we're swimming in this pond, and this guy's like, oh, where's your hike? It's actually, we're just doing a section hike, and we're done today. Now, some people will be like, we're done. You have a bed, you have a warm meal, you have all this stuff. This is fantastic. And his reaction was like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And it's just a different thing. And the last little story about that, Casey was talking about Katahdin, and we thought so many people would pass us because this was like in early September. So there's a lot of through hikers finishing up Katahdin. And we got up there early. We saw all these people camping, and we're like, yeah, we're probably going to get passed by almost everybody who's still sleeping is probably going to pass us as through hikers. But I remember one young woman, we're going up, and people would talk. It's like, oh, you finishing, when you start, and we talk about being section hikers. And one woman, she, passing me, and it's like, oh yeah, we're section hikers. Oh, section hikers, have you done the whole trail? I was like, yeah, we finished 10 years, 10 years in the making. And she turned around and looked, she said, wow. She said, that's dedication. Mm-hmm. And to me, I thought, what are you talking about? A through hiker, to me, that is incredible dedication. But she just had this different perspective of it, of the dedication of going out year after year and planning things and kind of the things that the section hikers go through. So that community is just fantastic.
Yeah. And I think it's vital, and it's something, that's a piece that I think all of us long for. And when we go out there, we want that. So, and I think a lot of hikers now, here we are, I don't know, 7 or 8 weeks into this coronavirus COVID-19 thing. And it's been awesome talking with you guys, because it just, churns my heart to, yes, I can't wait to get back out there. I can't wait to, get back out on the trail, have a sense of community, share food, and do all the things we used to do before we were afraid to, look at each other. And we might have masks on while we're out there or whatever we're going to do. But, it's like, I don't know if you guys know this gentleman. He does the hiker yearbook. His name's Odie, and he always just says hikers hike. So, hikers hike. And that's just kind of the way I'm looking at it. But before we get off here and I have you guys read, this has been 100% phenomenal. And thank you again so much to both of you for coming on here. Casey and Mark, and we got real deep, and I didn't realize we were going to be doing that, but this was phenomenal. But Mark, we have got to talk a little bit about this book, Thirdway. So on your mark, get set, go.
Okay. Well, I don't know how many years ago it was. Yeah, and a lot of people think like, I'm going to write a book one of these days. But a lot of years ago, I wrote down different goals, things I want in my life, and one was a long-term, really happy relationship, check mark, and different things. Yeah. And one is like, I write a book one of these days. So the idea being in the back of my head, what's it going to be about? So I started thinking about things I like books I like. And, one of the big advice for writers is write what you know. So it came about at about the time we finished the trail. And looking back, it might have been a substitution thing. I was substituting this book writing for being actually out in the trail. So I started writing what I knew, and I was like, well, what about this fictional me in the future? You know, I'm retired. I bought a lodge. I'm there. I'm running the lodge. What about the hikers that come through, all their stories? You know, kind of getting into, you know, even some of their stories from the beginning, and so I started writing that. And what I found was a lot of the books ended up being about the hikers and their stories. So it's about what I call intersecting communities. It's the people that own a hiker lodge, a man and his wife, and some of the local townspeople, and there's a worker or two at the lodge, and kind of what they go through in their lives, and what, you know, ups and downs in their lives. And then it follows a number of hikers in a hiking year. They're attempting to through hike. You know, so it follows them, and of course they end up at the lodge, and there's just an intersection of the through hikers and section hikers and the lodge. So it ends up being a lot about relationships, about what hikers go through. I had a coworker whose husband did a southbound through hike last year, and I'd given her a copy of the book, and he got off the trail and he finished it. And one of the best compliments, he said, you know, he said, gosh, this is written by someone who seems like he knows what he's talking about, you know, in terms of being out there on the trail and the
Right.
logistics and all this, and, you know, tried to make it realistic, but it's not a trail autobiography. You know, it's really, it happens to be at the setting of it is a trail, but it was fantastic. And I have to say that sometimes it'd be rainy here, it'd be cold out, and sometimes I would go out and walk here in my house or outside my house. And sometimes I would go back to the trail by writing.
Yep.
I would go back there and I was able to relive the stories, to go through and think about what happened on the trail, and put those things down on paper. It was a way to connect with the whole community, but do it fictionally. It's just a fantastic experience, and I love doing it.
And yes, everybody, the book is called Thirdway. It is phenomenal. I have a copy of it. I told Mark when I first read an excerpt of it, he had me at hello. So, and I don't read a lot of books, and I'm very open about that. I don't do a lot of journaling. So, for me to read a book, I mean, it's a big deal. So congratulations, Mark. Congratulations to you both for completing your 10-year section hike. I mean, wow, we have gone through it on this podcast. Phenomenal episode. And I can think of no better way than to end this, than to you guys, turn it over to you guys. And now we've come to the point in the podcast where Casey and Mark are going to sign off for us by reading their own journal entry, statement, or quote that will inspire us all to keep hiking section by section. And Casey, we will start with you.
Thank you. This has been a pleasure, Jester. I really appreciate it. My quote is from John Muir, The Yosemite, page 256. This says it all to me. Everybody needs beauty as well as bread, places to play in and pray in, where nature may heal and give strength to body and soul alike.
So my quote, and thank you also, Jester, for having us on. This is always enjoy talking with you. So my quote is an abstraction, actually, out of the Thirdway book that we talked about. At first, I kept section hiking to complete the entire AT, as though that would make me complete. But I found it wasn't about that. It was about the journey. Sure, tangible and abstract goals are great, but what's most important now is for me to keep going in a positive direction. The best I can hope for on or off the trail is that I am on a good path and enjoying the journey one day and one step at a time.
Thank you both very much. And you know what, Casey, whether you're in Texas or on the East Coast or wherever you guys are, I know the Appalachian Trail's in your heart. Mark, I know it's in your heart. Thank you guys both very much for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jester.
Thank you, Mark and Casey, for coming on the podcast. I am really glad you both agreed to come back on and record another episode. I am pretty sure this one turned out to be so much more. I am positive the listeners were right there with you with that first hike and everything you both learned over the next 10 years of section hiking. Casey, it is very evident that your heart will always hold a special place for the Appalachian Mountains. And Mark, I am glad you have written the book Thirdway so the rest of us can read about the stories at the Thirdway Lodge. I wish you both the best as you continue on your life journey. Thanks for listening, everybody. And just a reminder, new episodes of the podcast release every Saturday. And as always, happy section hiking.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night, heading toward the morning light. I wonder if you'd wander with me, and I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods. You're wondering if I go wandering with you, what kind of trouble we'll get ourselves into. Would it be wrong to tag along with a band of vagabonds? You wonder if I'd wander with you. So I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river. I'm wondering if you'd come wandering my way, if you ever get lost or if the trail leads you astray. The music of the pack can always bring you back. I wonder, can we wander away? And I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
For the ones who work hard to ensure their crew can always go the extra mile, and the ones who get in early so everyone can go home on time, there's Grainger, offering professional-grade supplies backed by product experts so you can quickly and easily find what you need. Plus, you can count on access to a committed team ready to go the extra mile for you. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.